Was it a general strike? Was it an aborted general strike? Anyway, of course, this occurred after the death of 6 Israeli captives. Exactly how they died, I think, remains a matter of dispute. I think in war, one should be very cautious about any news. So the Israeli authorities say they were shot because Israel had sent some Shin Bet army team to get them out. On the other hand, we have the Hamas story about them, or at least some of them, I don't know the details, being either shot by Israel or died in bombing. Of course, we had the call for a general strike. This was adding to the protests called by relatives of the captives. And of course, we had the courts in Israel then banning the general strike. Has to be said, at least in terms of the reports that I've read, it still went ahead, but was called short. But it went ahead, first of all, in municipalities where the opposition is either in control or strong. So, for example, Tel Aviv. On the other hand, certainly when it came to government employees and the general observance of this general strike, support for it was much less in Jerusalem, and obviously in East Jerusalem, this would be a settler politics. So, not surprisingly, if anyone who knows, Israeli politics, that's where the supporters of the right wing of the existing government and its various components would be concentrated. Either way, on the Sunday before the general strike, we had reports of 500,000 Israelis taking to the streets in Tel Aviv. Reports are of 200,000. That's an awful lot of people, given the actual size of the Israeli population. And also, we should add the size of the Hebrew, the Jewish Israeli population. But we should also put into this formula that it wasn't just Herastadt, the General Workers Union, that called a general strike. But we also had corporations. I don't know about ordering, but about encouraging their workers to take the Monday off to actually join the protest. So this wasn't what you would call an ordinary general strike. Clearly, as the court said, this was a political strike, and this was a political strike designed to pressurize the Netanyahu government to shift its position when it came to negotiations with Hamas. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. I suppose that it isn't surprising that some elements of the left, most of the left, I think, get it basically right. But it shouldn't really surprise us that there are some elements of the left that look at this general strike as some sort of harbinger of better times, harbinger of Arab Jewish unity. Personally, I think that's profoundly mistaken. So, for example, I was reading in The Socialist, the paper of the Socialist Party in England and Wales, that, for a brief few hours, this is a quote, this general strike exposed where real power lay. I think that's mistaken. You could say that real power is closing things down, but when it's done in cooperation with your bosses, I don't think that shows anything of the sort. Indeed, what I would say is what it's an illustration of is the lack of political independence of the working class. when it acts as a tail of Peace Party, call it maybe the sort of center in Israeli politics. I sort of loathe to use the word the left of Israeli politics in this particular context. But anyway, when it's in the context of a struggle within Zionism, I think that the word left is misapplied. Nevertheless, what we were told in the Socialist, which apparently is meant to give us hope, is not only was there this brief general strike, but lo and behold, it's not only the Arab Israelis that suffer poverty. So according to the figures, 39% of them officially live in poverty. So do ultra Orthodox Jews. That's their description, by the way, not mine. I personally would have thought that rather than use the word ultra Orthodox, I would actually just prefer the word Orthodox Jews. Either way, we're told that 35% of them live in poverty. And this is meant to give us hope. So we're meant to sort of conjure up a picture of ultra-Orthodox Jews, Socialist Party's description, marching shoulder to shoulder with the Arab 20% of Israel's population. I don't think that works. The fact of the matter is that if we look at the ultra-Orthodox, again, their words, not mine, what you tend to get is when they come into politics, well, isn't it a surprise? They tend to support the parties, the politics of the right, as opposed to the politics of the left. In other words, some sort of a crude economistic approach to this question is misleading. And it sort of says that if you're in poverty, somehow that's a driver to the left. Well, no, it can actually be a driver to the right, because what this 35% in poverty will be saying is we don't want to be like those Arabs. We want our national privileges. That's the tendency in such circumstances, i.e. under circumstances of what is called an exclusion colony, as opposed to an exploitation colony. Okay, we should also add that Herastrut, as I say, the General Workers' Union, it's very hard simply to call it a union. Again, in some sections of the left, we get a description of it being Israel's version of the TUC. What we need to understand is that this union was responsible basically for giving birth to the Labour Party in Israel, and certainly ensuring that it formed basically the core of the government in Israel from 48, I don't know till when, till about 1970. In other words, what we have here is a union, and actually is at the forefront of the Zionist settler project, and indeed what characterized it, not only in its early years, but right on into the situation where Israel declared independence, was campaigns to actually bar capitalists from employing Arab labor. So they would picket employers and demand 100% Jewish employment as opposed to employing cheaper Arab labor. They also distinguished themselves from attacking Arab market stalls, Arab shops, on the basis that stalls, shops should be exclusively Jewish. Well, You can say that the TUC has got its faults, but I don't think we can actually therefore equate even our TUC with its pretty mixed and sometimes horrible record with what we actually have in Israel. I think it's therefore important to stress the point that it's very unlikely that there will be any progressive solution within Israel itself, because what we have in Israel is something like an 80% Jewish majority, a 20% Arab minority. And what we have is a dynamic to the right, a dynamic that doesn't produce working class unity, but actually reinforces the division in the working class. And certainly that's why we in the CPGB basically look to a regional solution to this question. And the solution is the working class in this region taking the lead. I would still say that it's got traction in the demand for Arab unification. This was something that was extraordinarily potent in the 1950s into the 1960s. And certainly with that, you have to talk about working class leadership. We're not talking about a rerun of Nasser or a rerun of, Baathism. So we're talking about Arab unity led by the working class that puts the working class in power. Fundamentally no different in that sense to the sort of perspective that Marx and Engels had when it came to German unification in the 19th century. So instead of a Bismarck, what they envisaged, what they fought for, was the working class taking the lead on this question. And in the process, of course, you overthrow the Ba'athist dictatorship in Syria, the monarchies in Saudi Arabia and Jordan and elsewhere, the military regime in Egypt. And on that basis, then you've got something to offer this 80% majority in Israel. Hey, how about joining the ruling class? Hey, how about actually breaking with these corporations that actually exploit you? How about joining in with comrades in Europe, comrades in other parts of the world that are fighting for socialism and maybe have actually achieved, the rule of the working class? That, so at least as far as I can see, although it seems the most distant perspective, is actually the most realistic perspective that we actually have available to us today. Everything else, I think, in terms of various one-state solutions, various two-state solutions, falls at the first hurdle. Okay, I thought I'd then turn to a related story. I was reading this in the online journal Democracy Now, and this was an interview with Gershon Baskin. I don't know if anyone recalls him or have heard him speak on the media before, but he is the guy that took the lead in negotiating the freeing of Gilad Shalit. I don't know if you remember him. The Hamas, I think, exchanged him. He was an Israeli soldier that they'd captured. I think they exchanged him for something like 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. But it's this guy, Gershon, that was primarily responsible for negotiating the deal. Well, apparently, he's kept his back channels open to Hamas and has been talking to Hamas over, the recent period. He actually broke his contacts with Hamas because of October the 7th, but given, the captives, the understandable human desire of their relatives and friends to get them back, he actually put himself forward to reopen his contacts with people in the Hamas leadership that he knows from previous experience. Either way, he said that about 2 weeks ago, so this would be about 1 week ago, so about 3 weeks ago, from our point of view, I obtained an agreement. And this was going to be a 3-week deal. So in other words, it's going to take 3 weeks to complete, for the release of 107 hostages. I think that's the remaining ones. Certainly it's the ones that Hamas can bargain with. That's my understanding. But anyway, 107 hostages. Remember, this is his words, not mine. For an end of the war, which means Israel withdrawing completely from Gaza and a Palestinian prisoner release. Now, he says that he got an agreement in principle that the entire Hamas leadership agrees with that outline. So the details can be negotiated, but Hamas operates on the basis of not one person say so, but some sort of collective agreement between its, I think they call it the Polit Bureau, so the political bureau of Hamas. So they'd agreed to it. But again, these are his words, but Netanyahu does not want an end to the war. And what Netanyahu was doing is insisting on this, what do they call it? The Philadelphia corridor between Gaza and Egypt. And I'm sure you've heard various Israeli spokespersons saying that if they don't secure this corridor, then the tunnels will be reopened and the arms will flow and Hamas will launch another October the 7th. Well, my understanding is, again, from the same source, actually, the tunnels ain't operating. They've been sealed. Egypt doesn't want the tunnels operating, and therefore this is a, how should you put it, an excuse to precisely stop a deal being done. You can get commentary which misses the point, really, that if Israel merely manned this little strip of territory, its troops would be a sitting target. Maybe not for Hamas, but for anyone else who fancies having a go, and they would have a go. You know, the idea that you just leave Israeli troops along this long, thin piece of land and you don't lob rockets, you don't lob shells at them. So militarily, this has been described as setting up the IDF, you know, as ducks to be bang, 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 shot down. But of course, that isn't what it's about. This isn't a serious military proposal. This is merely Netanyahu insisting on something that's a credible story for the naive that can be brought by sufficient numbers of the Israeli population that excuses not doing a deal that actually gets back these war captives, that excuses not doing a deal with Hamas. And indeed, what we have with Netanyahu saying that he's going to get the Hamas leader in Gaza, we're going to search Sinwar out and we're going to kill you. That is his declaration in terms of peace negotiations. He does not want peace negotiations. He wants the war to continue. And I think that Moshe Machover argues in the current edition of the Weekly Worker, partially, of course, we all know that this is for personal reasons. He wants to keep out of the courts. He wants to keep out of prison. He wants to stay as prime minister. But we also need to add that Zionism has got an aim of a greater Israel, to use the phrase, from the river to the sea. That's the aim. And of course, to establish that and to ensure that that continues to function, it has to be not only an ethnocracy, the rule of one ethnic group, but given the rough balance between the Israeli Jewish population, the Hebrew population, and the Palestinian population in a greater Israel, well, that doesn't work. So therefore, Israel as a political economy is therefore driven to ethnic cleansing. We've seen that in 48. And Netanyahu and his fellow cabinet members, often they're completely explicit about the necessity of a second Nakba, a second round of ethnic cleansing, either of the West Bank, either of Gaza, either of what we now call Israel proper, or all of them. So that really is what this war is about. It really isn't about getting the war captives back. That's a cover. That's obvious. That was obvious from the beginning. And neither is it about defeating Hamas. As long as there's Palestinians, under present circumstances, there will be a Hamas. It's a political movement, and you can kill individual fighters, but you're not going to kill the idea. For every individual leader you kill, 100 will come forward to replace them.